What's up, guys? It's me, Disbearity here, and I'm here to bring you guys the final dev diary to Age of Wonders 4. Now, as you guys know, this is the unit revamp for the game here, so this is going to be quite interesting. So let's see what they're going to be talking about here today. So, we got Tom here, the game director for Age of Wonders 4. Today, I want to talk about some big changes that are coming to the next Scorpion update. This free update released with the new Rise from the Ruins culture pack on March 9th. So we only got 4 more days left, or less than 4 days left for this DLC drop. So I'm excited, or expansion, however you want to call it. The original design for the unit defense or resistance was taken from Age of Wonders 3. Defense reduces damage on the physical channel. Resistance reduces damage on the non-physical channels like fire, ice, etc. So magic in a sense. While this worked fine in that game, the enchantment system raised an issue in Age of Wonders 4 that we hadn't anticipated. As the game went on, enchantments started replacing more and more physical damage with magical damage. So at the start of the game, your warriors might do 12 physical damage, but at the end of the game, it may do 6 physical and 4 blighted damage and 4 fire. Okay, now with that said here, this led to several issues. Defense is more useful in the early game, and resistance is more useful in the late game. Since often players often optimize for the late game, defense was considered less valuable overall. Shield units who only rely on defense to stay alive couldn't really do their job late game, since most attacks bypassed the defense and could kill them anyways. And then battle mages became less useful since everyone could do magical damage. The last 2 points were particularly painful, since having distinct and useful unit roles is an important factor in making combat feel consistent and easy to read. In order to fix the issue, we decided to redesign the stats so that instead of looking at the type of damage an attack did, we would instead look at the type of attack itself. So this example here, defense reduces damage from abilities with melee and physical range tags. Resistance reduces damage from spells and abilities with a magic tag. This means that it doesn't matter what enchantments you put into your archer, their attacks remain physical range and are entirely blocked by defense stat. Since shield units have high defense, archer units will always do poorly against them, which was the intention for the original design we made when we started to make the game. Of course, when they made this change, in a big core system, complete havoc of course ensued. We had to make changes all over the place to make sure that the various bonuses, units, and spells in the game work properly. So they're going to give us an example here. We rebalanced defense and resistance across the board. The general goal we wanted to achieve was that frontline melee fighters will be easy to kill with magic and hard to kill with physical attacks, while magical units would be the opposite. So we went through the game's units and tweaked their defense and resistance stats to make that happen. Man, I sound like a curse there, like to make that shit happen. For example, you'll now see that most shock, fighter, and polar units have 2 more points of defense than they have resistance. Most support units have 2 more points of resistance than they have defense, which makes sense, they're squishy. And most shield units have 5 more points of defense than they have resistance. Obviously, there are variations here. Mystic culture units tend to have 1 more point of resistance, for example, but in general, there's a clear reason to use battle mage against a shield unit instead of an arch unit. So then they went ahead and added physical protection stat and renamed the elemental resistance stats. So previously they didn't need a separate stat for specifically reducing physical damage, since that was exactly what defense did. Since defense now worked on multiple damage channels, they needed to add it. See, they also renamed all damage type resistance stats to damage type protection, since concerned people would confuse the damage type stats and actual resistance stat if they had the same name. So they added the magic fighter unit type. The major issue they had was simply that the magic damage was too rare, or the testers realized that it was better to go all in on defense as a stat, since so few units they face could do magical damage. They fixed this. Well, the fix for this was to create a new unit type, the magic fighter, who can do damage attacks but at melee range. So a bunch of existing units were converted to a new unit. So now we have a new unit type within the game, which is the magic fighter. So that's really cool. So we have a physical fighter, and of course a magic fighter. I like that idea. So most elemental spirits, wyverns, and also corrupted souls are now been converted to magic fighters. So if I were to zoom in, you can see that right here, they're a magic fighter. So that's pretty cool. I like that. They then discovered that these units were really good at killing frontline units, so they had to nerf them a bit. They also converted dragons to do magic melee attacks and then nerfed them a bit after a wounded, unupgraded bone dragon managed to one-shot a tier 1 shield unit by doing 118 damage in a single turn. Yo, that's crazy. Unfortunately, they didn't have the opportunity to add magical melee attacks to heroes, since that would involve making large updates to hero skill trees. Because among other things, that dragon rules still do non-magical melee attacks, unlike their non-ruler cousins. That means that could that be a potential hint that they might do that sometime in the future in a big major update? I wonder. We also made a ton of minor changes of form traits, enchantments, and ability to try and get the new system working properly. The end result is something they're quite happy with. Combat feels more tactical, with the type of unit you choose to attack with and having more relevance, with most units having more clearly defined uses and weaknesses. So they also did a unit movement rework. Okay, that's pretty interesting. So the idea to use different units move at different speeds over the world has been a core feature since the series began. It simply made sense that a mounted unit would move faster than a foot soldier, and the older games were balanced by giving the slower units other advantages such as lower costs and superior stats, or by simply making faster units rare. Age of Wonders 4, however, gives players the ability to choose if certain units are mounted or not, as well as giving the players access to various special mounts that will boost a unit's combat capabilities. This meant that in many cases, mounted units were not only faster than other units, they were flat out better. This led to an issue because the ability move quickly over the world map is very strong. You can clear more resource nodes in the same time period, letting you collect more rewards and giving you more resources to spend on making more armies to clear more nodes and get more rewards, and so on. You can move armies back to defend your cities more easily, reducing dangers of invasion. You can invade enemy domains faster, so it's harder for them to respawn. So, with that said, the first point especially meant that many players would focus entirely on fielding only armies of mounted and flying creatures to maximize their early game economies. One of the core goals of Age of Wonders 4 is to give players the freedom to make whatever faction they wish, so a mechanic that will limit many players to only using a handful of units while also forcing them to always take a form trait for mounts was clearly working against that. The solution was pretty simple. They would give all units in the game the same number of movement points on the world map, 40 are the same as normal cavalry. Flyers would have the same number of move points as cavalry, who would have the same number of move points as infantry. This meant that your army composition didn't matter as much. In most cases, your army would move at the same speed regardless. Now, I think that's pretty fair, but let's see here. Of course, we don't want all those units to actually move the same everywhere, since it wouldn't make any sense. So, mounted units still move faster in combat than other units, fair. Flyers and floating units still move over difficult terrain faster than other unit types, makes sense. And then special abilities like Forest Walk and Swamp Walk still let units move faster on certain terrain types, fair. And also, scout units have more move points than every other unit type since they need to do their job, which is scouting. And then, of course, they had to make a bunch of other changes to get this change to fit into the game properly. For example, goddamn, so they're definitely, this is a big balance patch and rework here, for sure. This mainly affected the cost of mounted mount traits, which were all reduced except for the flying mounts, which are still considered good enough to keep their old cost. We also had to tweak mount masters and athletics, since they are also considerably weaker after making this change. We gave each unit a combat stat speed. So the previous system had every unit have between 32 and 48 movement points, with most hexes in combat costing 8 points to traverse. This was mainly done so that units will have the same move points in and out of combat, even though it was unintuitive, and annoying to parse. Since we no longer wanted units to have the same move speed in and out of combat, we gave each unit a combat speed stat that showed the number of hexes it could move in combat. If a unit has a combat speed of 4, it cannot move 4 hexes. It's pretty simple. Then they slowed down the flyers in the world map. Giving flyers the same move points as the other units was undermined somewhat by our discovery that flyers spend fewer move points than other units in a pretty much every situation. Since they didn't want players to only take builds with flying mounts, they had to fix this slightly by increasing the move cost of flying to match other movement types over flat terrain. A flyer would still be faster over difficult terrain like forest mountains and still fly over water without embarking, but most types of movement it will just be as fast as any other unit. And then after all this, they have a system where your armies move at a consistent speed over the world map, regardless what type units are in it. So you no longer have your whole army slow down because you let a war breed tag along with your cavalry, and you no longer must take flying mounts of every build in order to stay competitive. As they added bonus for people who didn't actively try and optimize move points in their builds, their armies now move a bit faster, which is quite nice. So basically what this whole meaning is like, back before, every unit went kind of like, at different speeds, right? You had your mounts going faster, you had your flyers going faster, yes, like example, spiders will go like 8x hexes in a sense, right? But now if you put them all in an army, they all consolidate to a certain move speed. So it could be like 4, or it could be 5, so on and so forth. So it's pretty cool, pretty unique, and I like the way how they did that. Oh boy, so they're also reworking unit experience too. All right, let's get into it then. So the unit experience system in Age of Wonders 4 was based on the same system used in Planetfall. By the way, Planetfall is actually a pretty good game. I actually enjoyed Planetfall. It's sad that it didn't catch on with a lot of people, at least for my experience. And it's a fairly straightforward affair, with the player earning XP by killing enemies and having that XP distributed amongst the units that took part in the battle. There are a few wrinkles, mainly designed to prevent a single high-powered hero from rocketing up in level by soloing every fight they could, but otherwise did it the job the game needed. There were still several issues, though, which meant we felt it was worth having another look at. So one of the issues simply was that a player was capable of having a lot of battles that would have a huge advantage over one who was not. Obviously, some advantage here was expected, is in fact the whole point of the system, but the advantage was too big. That meant that players were forced to constantly optimize who and how often they fought for maximum XP. It also meant that player who had bad luck, I guess, like RNG or whatnot, either through a bad auto combat result or from the RMG placing units too far apart, rapidly behind other players. So another issue that came down to how it felt when they were not earning XP. If an army couldn't fight, it felt like a waste since it wasn't gaining XP to become stronger. If the unit was at maximum level, it felt like a waste actually to use it, since it was wasting XP that could be used to a unit not at maximum. That is very true though, because you don't want to just have that one army, burning through the game where you can just like build up and get another army, help them gain their XP, and then so on and so forth. That is very true. So the final issue was that the XP values in the system were just too small. A tier 1 unit only needed 4 XP to reach its first level. Small numbers are easy for players to process and understand, but have a big disadvantage once you start adding modifiers like gain plus 20% XP, since the XP system only use whole numbers, as 20% bonus would turn a 2 into a 3, which is the same as a 10% bonus or a 50% bonus. Their numerical instability, yeah, I'm proud of myself. I actually said that on the first target, numerical. Instability led to all sorts of strangeness, with the players trying to optimize XP to gain through combining various bonuses. Since there are several distinct issues, they ended up having to implement several distinct solutions. Okay, so they multiply XP values by 10. So something needed 4 XP before, now it needs 40 XP. Holy shit. The unit gave 2 XP for being killed, it now gave 20 XP. These bigger numbers will work in much predictable way when applying bonus. It meant the impact of the 10% bonus was much more predictable and balanced. So they gave every unit in the game an XP per turn. So yeah, as you see, yeah, this means that every unit in the game earns 10 XP every single turn just for being alive, meaning a tier 1 unit will gain its first medal after 4 turns, even if it does nothing at all. We combine this with halving the amount of XP that units gain from other sources. This means that if you were to have 9 fights and turns that in the new system, your units will level up roughly the same amount as they would have done before. Oh wow. However, if you had no fights at all in the same period, you would still level up around half as much. Then they also added extra sources of passive XP to other few places. For example, putting a unit in a city with palisade walls gives it additional 5 per turn. Putting a unit in a city with stone walls gives it additional 15 XP per turn, and replaces the palisade wall bonus. The rapid evolution enchantment from the Tome of Evolution gives 15 XP per turn to units that can evolve. The career soldier's empire skill gives 10 XP per turn instead of the percentage increase. What this generally meant was that the player felt less pressure to constantly fight with their units in order to keep them useful, and could in fact invest in ways to level up their units in other ways if they wished. Then they also brought back the endless level systems from Age of Wonders 3. So when a unit reaches legendary rank, it can now keep earning XP in order to earn exalted ranks, which each exalted rank costs as much XP as needed to get from champion to legend rank, and increases the unit's maximum HP by 10. While this is a neat feature, and making unkillable tier 1 units is a fun thing to do, we are aware that this might not be for everyone, so we added the option to disable endless levels in each realm setup screen. Okay, that makes sense. I can understand that. Now, I mean, if they made it like a prestige thing where each time, you know, you hit the, like, you know, a legend stats or whatever, you could reset your unit, but you also get bonus stats, maybe something like that. I mean, that'd be kind of cool. So they also added a color picker to the faction creation. So this means that you guys can now pick any color that you want for your faction banner appearance or whatever without having, you know, set things. So that's pretty cool. So that's pretty, thank you for the honor, appreciate that. Then they also made it easier for cities to annex provinces from other cities. Believe it or not, it was actually already possible for a city to annex provinces from other cities in certain circumstances. However, the UI for this was unclear, and many people, myself included, didn't actually even realize it was possible. So the fixes, they updated the game's rules for the city to make provinces for vassals in cities in your own cities. They also done a big pass on the UI to make it clear which provinces a city can take from another. They also updated the economic view to be more consistent, what improvement pens it displays where. So in conclusion here, no, he also read it and appreciates us and you know, love us. So with all this said though, with all these dev diaries here, I want to appreciate the amount of transparency that they have been giving us, the players, when it comes to Age of Wonders 4. It feels like they know it, like they kind of know like what we want, and they keep coming out with better content for this game, and I appreciate them wholeheartedly. I think that this DLC or expansion is going to be a good one, and I hope that it's very successful. I'm getting it day one, of course. But you guys let me know what y'all think about it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching and listening. I do appreciate it, and I'll see y'all within the Astral Sea. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like and also hit the bell notification down below. Thanks for watching.